Hey, this video is in response to King Heathen's video, Spiritual Death or God Lied, in which he's talking about this Genesis story, Adam and Eve, and how they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and didn't die immediately, and how Christians say that this was a spiritual death, that they immediately died. A spiritual death, not necessarily physical death. You know what always bothered me a hell of a lot more than that was what I'm reading in Genesis chapter 3, verses 22 through 24. It says, "And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat, and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden, to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword, which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life." Basically, these three verses tell us that there wasn't one tree in the Garden of Eden that God didn't want the man to eat from. There were two. He had already eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and he became aware that he was naked. He had already sinned. But there was a second tree, the tree of life, which God didn't want Adam and Eve to eat from. Because if they had eaten from, it says right here in verse 22, "And now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat, and live forever." Wow, the tree of life lets you live forever, even after you sin? How does that square with Revelations, which says that Jesus Christ was a lamb slain from the foundation of the earth? In other words, when God first created the earth, the plan was already in place that Jesus Christ would be the sacrificial lamb. The only way that a sinful man could live forever was through accepting the sacrifice of Jesus Christ for his sins. But yet, here, the very first man, the very first woman, right in the Garden of Eden, could have taken from this tree, the second tree, the tree of life, and if they'd eaten from it, they would have lived forever, even though they'd sinned. The New Testament tells us that the wages of sin is death. How does that square with the fact that God knew if they'd eaten from this tree, they would have lived forever? That's why he kicked them out of the Garden of Eden. That's why he put cherubims there with the flaming sword, to keep them from eating from the second tree, the tree of life. The very existence of this tree, a tree whose fruit which would have allowed Adam and Eve to eat from and live forever, is at odds with the entire rest of the Bible. That bothers me a hell of a lot more than the fact that they didn't die the same day. The fact that they could have eaten from this second tree and lived forever, even after they had sinned. Those few verses are at odds with the entire rest of the Bible. How do you square that? Somebody tell me that.